How's it going, everybody? Welcome to the Deciduous Bonsai podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Robson, joined with my co-host,
Maciek,
who is a moderator on the bonsai subreddit. He's a student here at RAKUYO and a very good friend of mine. So on this episode, we're excited to talk about bonsai as a lifestyle. Maciek, what's a bonsai lifestyle?
it's a lifestyle that leads to good bonsai, to quality bonsai specifically.
Okay, so if we're talking, there's a lot of different levels and ways to do bonsai. If you want really quality bonsai, that does yield a specific lifestyle, and that lifestyle is something that you can trace when you look at all of the people that you look up to in bonsai. Like when I look up to people like Kimura or Shinji Suzuki or Takayama, when I look up to people like Ryan Neal here in the U.S., my teacher Michael Hagedorn, even really high-level hobbyists like Sergio Kwan. A lot of what we're going to talk about today are things that I've kind of seen as commonalities between each one of those people.
Something that has to be true about those people to get to that level, in other words.
That's right. Like, what do all of those people have in common? That's really what we're going to talk about today. Do we want to kind of give people an outline of what we're going to talk about before we talk about it?
Yeah.
So, I just got back from Japan. I saw 20 gardens over there, and in thinking about this a lot, this topic in general lately, I've kind of deduced that there's three main criteria that I really look for. Number one is quality material, so who's working on the best trunks, the best trees. Number two is the work itself, who's doing the highest level, most quality focused work. And number three is who's presenting that work in a really beautiful space for people to have the ability to appreciate it. And those are the three kind of topics that we're going to noodle on a little bit today and kind of chew and try and piece something together with.
Right. Let's get into it.
All right, get into it. Number one is material. Bonsai is a lifestyle. I've found that all of the people that we look up to, or at least that I look up to in bonsai, they are choosing trees of some of the best material. My teacher, Michael Hagedorn, was very, very focused on this during my apprenticeship. I wasn't allowed to bring something through the gate of the garden that didn't have a prize-winning kind of trajectory to it. If this tree wasn't, destined to be the best example of it, then it wasn't worth coming through the garden gate.
And every apprentice that works under Michael Hagedorn gets that big reset, right? Where they have to kind of start at a point where their water line or their high water mark should never be lower than X. And I remember my first class with Michael, my very first lesson in the very first class was, let's rate these trunks in the garden so that we know what is a 5, what is a 7, what is a 10.
Yeah, material selection was a lifestyle. It was really evaluating and discussing trees minus all the sentimentality that could be attached to them. And when we would do that ranking exercise, there were often trees in Michael's garden that we might like more than other trees, but it had maybe a lower ranking score than some of the other trees in the garden. So it's just kind of, having a baseline quality of, trying to figure out what that is for you at home. Maybe that's, maybe that baseline could be, okay, I want every single tree in my garden to look really nice in a club show. Or maybe you take it a step further. I want every single tree in my garden to be able to get into the Pacific Bonsai Expo. Or maybe a level on top of that is I want every single tree in my garden to be a prize-winning tree at the Pacific Bonsai Expo. There's a lot of different ways that you can frame it, but having some type of focus and having a bar for quality really does drive good bonsai.
Yeah, I remember Michael saying, rate everything from 1 to 10, and don't keep anything that's 5 or below.
Yeah, so you still might have 5, 6, and 7s, but and we're talking more trunk, not the work on the trees, just the thing that's hard to change, right? But you can talk about material selection, and maybe we've been doing that for the last few minutes, and it can come off as kind of elitist. But one of the things that I love about bonsai is that there is no elitism, because every single one of you listening at home, both of us, you can make quality. Like, yes, time is important in the equation, but remember, Ebihara grew kokofu trees in 25 to 30 years. So if you think you have 25 to 30 years, you can do bonsai at the highest quality without spending tens of thousands of dollars, even without spending hundreds of dollars.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you can do high level bonsai without a lot of financial investment.
Yeah, this is something you and I talk about a lot. Where I'm a bit more price conscious. I want to be careful with not like buying everything at an auction.
That's right.
And you've taught me a lot of times that this is made. Some tree that you showed me is made from a cutting.
Yeah, and well, that's the fun thing about talking about material selection and quality is that, a seedling kind of has the utmost potential. Like, this could be a prize-winning kokofu tree, or this could be a tree that we need to plant in the ground because it's not suitable for bonsai. It has everything kind of baked into it, and the older that seedling gets, the less potential it tends to have as certain decisions are being kind of done to that.
So there are quite a few people out there who have really impressive collections, but they're just too big. Do you think there's hoarding going on?
I think there's a lot of bonsai hoarding going on. And I think, when we're talking about bonsai at the highest lifestyle, obsessive lifestyle possible, all the top gardens and artists that we love and respect, they're a lot less sentimental about individual trees. They don't really hoard individual trees. What they are more focused on is the overall garden, the overall practice.
The aggregate of it all.
The aggregate of it all.
Right.
And so that's what I think is really meaningful is hoarding. We're going to talk about work in a little bit, and hoarding has a lot of negative effects for, if you have too many trees and you're not able to work on them, then yes, you have too many trees.
You can't possibly have enough hours in the year to work on 500 trees.
That's right.
If quality is the goal.
If quality is the goal, yeah. I know a lot of people in the bonsai hobby who have more trees than I do, and I do this full time as a professional.
Yeah, with help.
With help,
yeah.
Yeah. And so there's many people who have more trees than I do, and you're just not going to be high quality if you have high number. Mm-hmm. Quality over quantity, I think, is one of the best lessons that I ever got from Michael, but also just as I study all the people doing this at the top of the game.
I've always found it really fascinating how dispassionate people can be that are working at a very high level with extraordinary trees, and yet they're willing to just have them cycle in and out of the garden.
Yeah.
And maybe the cure there is to be caring about the whole thing. So maybe like your whole self,
yes.
your whole bonsai self needs to be consistent.
Yeah, I can be very ruthless with trees that I have here on the benches, because for me, the thing that I care about, my care bubble, is the garden as a whole.
Right.
And so if there's one tree here that isn't serving that purpose, that's just, a step or two below, it's dragging everything down, then it's very easy for me to purge that.
Does it stick out for you like a sore thumb? Is that kind of like...
Yeah, and it's like I see it, I focus on it, it bugs me, it feels out of place. And so, one ruthless way of saying this is, your collection is as good as your worst tree.
Right.
There's a Colin.
That's brutal.
It's brutal. If you want to hear brutal, Colin Lewis used to do workshops, and he would say, you bring your absolute best tree in your collection and the absolute worst tree in your collection.
It's interesting that you could learn about a grower that way, right?
Yeah, and what he would do during the workshop, if you want to talk about brutal, is he would walk around with a trash can and have people throw away their worst tree.
Yeah, that's incredible.
And it's ruthless, and it's probably not, if you're in the hospitality business of making people feel good about playing bonsai, it's probably not a good way to get rehired, but
right.
It probably, if everybody threw away the worst tree in their collection right now, or maybe better yet, gave it to a beginner someone who can learn and practice on, it would probably make all of our bonsai yards just a little bit better.
I've been purging a bit of material lately under your guidance, and I find a feeling of freedom as soon as those go out the door. When they're no longer around and they're like fully
Yep.
out of the house, or maybe in the trash or in the burn pile, I feel
Yep.
so good about it, because what remains is clarity.
Yes.
Now, Going back to the sticking out like a sore thumb thing, how did you develop the ability to just walk a garden and have clarity on which trees belong and which trees don't? Because for that to even happen, you kind of have to be able to look at things properly, right?
Yeah. I think, like I said, you need that context. So if the context is, the context here in this garden, is, I want some of the best, most beautiful deciduous trees in North America. And so if something is here that doesn't have that trajectory, then for me, it doesn't belong. It doesn't belong to walk through the gate of the garden.
But in terms of the skill, the actual thing that you're doing in your brain, when you get down to selecting what's in and what's out, there's a long road to get there, right?
There is. And material selection, to be really good and obsessive and have a really strong lifestyle for getting the best material, it's a very active part of bonsai. It doesn't. It sounds like, whenever you're at a bonsai nursery, you just buy the best thing that they have. Right. That's not what I'm saying.
Right.
What I'm saying is you need to train yourself to know what is the best thing that they have. And you do this by species. So Japanese maples, let's say. If you want to buy the best piece of Japanese maple material that you possibly can, or grow it yourself, if you've never seen 100 good Japanese maples, then you are at odds. And that doesn't necessarily mean you need to get a plane ticket and go to Japan and, spend thousands of dollars to look at them.
But somehow you have to become good at ranking.
You have to be good at ranking and analyzing. Right. You have to be a little bit of a snob.
Right.
You need to have, for me to, select the best Japanese maple material, I need to have a reference point of 10,000 Japanese maples in my head that I can compare against.
Right. So these aren't abstract characteristics. They're really art-based training almost.
That's right. Yeah, I train my eye for this. Right. It's in the same way that a sommelier might train their palate. Right. You don't understand what a good Cabernet is by never tasting Cabernet. You have to do a lot of tastings to build that database, that palate, and that's what we do with bonsai. Is the more that you study, I don't have a huge palate for Yamadori or conifers, but my colleague Ryan Neal is in front of collected trees from Randy and Backcountry and all these other Yamadori hunters all day long, and so because he has that really strong database, I trust when Ryan says this is an exceptional lodgepole pine because he's seen, he knows thousands of lodgepole pines in his brain in order to make that assessment. I'm very much the same way with maples, with beech, with everything else. Is that's kind of where my study and focus is, and that's kind of how I prioritize.
So would you say that casting your net too wide in different styles, different species, and everything all at once may kind of actually reduce your ability to really hone in on what's good?
Yeah, I think if you're...
It's almost like a intellectual hoarding, right?
Yeah, if having that focus will definitely get you there faster. I don't think it's needed, but having a focus of, okay, I'm going to have pines, junipers, and Japanese maples. If you just had those three criteria, you could probably train your eye to spot good pines, junipers, and Japanese maples faster than if you just had one of everything. And that's something that I think, going along with us talking about hoarding, is there's a lot of people I experience in bonsai who have some list of trees that they're trying to check off. So it's, I need a Chinese quince. Not, I need another good tree of quality. It's, I need a Chinese quince. So the first Chinese quince that I see in front of me, I'm going to buy it so I can check off that box.
Right.
Okay, now I have that box checked off. Okay, now I need a hackberry.
It sounds like you have to be willing to admit that maybe you won't find that Chinese quince for quite a few years if you really care about...
Yeah, and doing the bonsai lifestyle is not this bingo card of collecting species. It's saying, I'm just looking for quality, and if it happens to be a Chinese quince of quality, which doesn't exist in the U.S., but if it happens to be in front of me, I'm going to have quality be the thing that you're trying to check off. And that's what Michael really instilled on me. I think, when you look at his teacher, Shinji Suzuki, I was just in his garden in Japan. He had probably the best example of all the different species kind of there present. You want to see the best white pine in Japan, it's probably at Suzuki's garden. You want to see the best black pine. I mean, he has these just incredible examples of amazing trees.
What do you say to somebody who is growing 30 of something that isn't necessarily spectacular, but they maybe want to learn how to do things on that species first.
I do think you need learning trees, and so if you material selection, this doesn't have to be the outright goal, because I do think it's more important to be active in bonsai than inactive. And so rather than being this snob that says, well, no Chinese quince exists that I want, so I'm just never going to buy a Chinese quince. That's not going to teach you how to work on a Chinese quince once you have it, and how to nicely display it or put it in a nice space once it's there. So I do think you need to work on trees, but that's where maybe, having trees that you practice on that are only there for the sake of your benefit, not because this is going to be some masterpiece. And then maybe that's a tree that you sell at one point and then replace it with something better. Once you either grow something better yourself and it gets old enough that it kind of takes over. I think in many ways in the United States, low quality bonsai, you can grow something that will replace it in a faster amount of time than you take that low quality tree to fix it.
Throw good after bad, yeah.
Exactly.
Right.
Boone taught that way, and that's why the Bay Island Club 10, 20 years ago was so successful. But yeah, I don't think it's necessarily you have to write a big check. I think you can grow your way. That's what I love about bonsai. Is like if we were collecting watches, yes, you need $80,000 to buy a Patek Philippe, and you would be on a 10-year wait list.
Yeah.
But
quality is morphological rather than...
Yeah, you can make your own quality in bonsai. Right. But you need this kind of obsessive lifestyle to kind of get there.
Right.
So stop with hoarding. Hoarding is like one of the biggest enemies of material selection when people have too many trees, because all of this is going to lead to point number 2 that we're going to make, and that's doing work on good trees. And that's another commonality that anyone who has this obsessive bonsai lifestyle who's doing this at the highest level, they're going to do really good work on the trees. If you have trees that you don't have time to work on, you have too many trees.
Right. Yeah. So the first thing we talked about in terms of material selection is like what, and then work is kind of like what do you spend your time doing during the year?
That's right.
And even that is subject to a kind of like a hoarding effect of like spending too much time on the things that maybe you enjoy a lot but aren't actually moving you towards a good goal, and that later on you're going to regret spending too much time. I see patterns of that in my own bonsai career, I guess you could call it. In retrospect, I can see, I should have spent time on this instead of that. There's a lot of this this term you've brought to me from Japan, which is the motenai.
Wasted opportunity. What a waste.
Yeah,
what a gross waste.
Right. So I guess the work part of the year, or the work part of this idea, is going to really quickly highlight what I'm spending my time on. It's going to tell me like, okay, you spend a lot of time snipping this or doing that. Wouldn't it be better if you did something different, right?
Yeah, like an example that we just talked about is, people who have, let's say, a Japanese maple that's just really poor quality. When, in the time that you could take to fix that poor quality Japanese maple, you could grow a better one, right? And so that just working on that tree with kind of no future, that's multi-nai. That's just kind of wasted opportunity. You could grow 10 better ones in the time that it would take to fix that bad tree. That's something I think a lot about is you could be doing really high level work, but high level work on material that's kind of a dead end is in a way kind of meaningless.
Do you think that I feel like I've observed it even here, that it's only after a while that we realize we've put a couple seasons into this, but it needs to go, right? So inevitably this work cycle will
especially if you're on a trajectory where the whole kind of garden is lifting, if there's trees that are going in a different level or trajectory, then there might be things that get sold and pieced out, purged along the way.
So work can transform material. We're always working on trees in front of us to maximize their quality at any given moment.
Yep.
But we still need to be analyzing all the time the ranking of that tree, even as we're working on it. Attempting to work on it might reveal that actually, you know what, this isn't going to work out. I'm not going to be able to make this work.
Yeah. I think when you look at a high level garden, what you're going to see is, most of the trees are going to stay there if the material selection was important from the beginning. Right. But you will, you always see and the people that we look up to, you always see trees coming in and going out. Like, I might find next year the best hornbeam that I've ever had the opportunity to find and get my hands on. And so obviously that's going to come in. And if I'm not a bonsai hoarder, then maybe something has to leave for that to come in.
Okay.
So
But
that's,
nevertheless, we've passed sort of through the sentimentality and hoarding problems. You know, now we're honing in our workability, and now we're trying to increase the ranking of every tree at every opportunity that we reasonably have during the year, right?
That's right. So let's say you've either grown or bought or sourced a really nice Japanese maple start. It has a good start to a nabari, a good start to a trunk line. Okay, now it's time to improve that nabari and put some branches on it that look really nice.
Right.
It's taking that material that you were so obsessive about choosing or growing and now doing something with it in a way that's interesting and beautiful.
So I feel like if I should, for every tree in my garden, I should know what skills I need to attain and what I need to train in, what I need to get better at in order to increase the quality of that material, right? And I have to spend some time during the year also doing that. It's training up.
I don't know that you need to know up front, but you need to have the ability to want to know.
Right.
Like you and I are
sniffing it
both
out.
playing with cottonwoods, right?
Right.
And so I source the best cottonwood trunks that I could possibly find. That's not to say I won't find better ones and maybe
probably
upgrade,
will,
replace
yeah.
them. But now it's, I don't know the secrets to working on cottonwood, but it's, okay, now that the work is actually here, we just need to start doing it and responding to what's working, what doesn't work. How do we tailor that work to make it more interesting, make it feel more beautiful?
Right. So staying on top of the material that we want to rise in quality over time, we have to train ourselves and the tree.
Train ourselves and the tree, exactly.
It's like a symmetrical thing in bonsai.
Yeah, I think you don't have bonsai without the human component, and so the human component, training ourselves, is as much, if not more important than actually training the tree.
Do you think working on other people's trees factors into this? Do you think that's part of this cycle of self-improvement, other people's improvement, maybe even reviewing other people's material and giving them, you had me looked at a few trees in the garden today, and you asked me, pick the 3 trees that you would throw out of this garden today, and I picked 2.
Yeah.
Reluctantly picked a third one after.
Yeah.
Is going to other people's gardens important in the work cycle?
Bonsai is a 3D art, and you cannot you can learn so much from photographs, from videos, but this is an art that is lived and breathed in person. You're going to learn how to find good material by seeing good material in person, going to an expo, going to Kimura's garden, getting out of the house is super important. And I don't know someone who's at the highest level obsessive bonsai lifestyle who's not getting out of the house and exposed to trees in person.
Right.
You can't do bonsai in a way living on an island, I think.
So that's the study part, but do you think helping other bonsai artists is part of this?
I think getting your hands on as many trees, so if we're talking work, I think getting your hands on as many trees as possible is important.
Because this is almost like, for me, this is a way to avoid hoarding at home, is that I know that if I have, say 30 or 40 trees,
yeah,
I can, if I run out of work, I can always come here to continue to hone my abilities, right?
I think working with someone who is better than you is the best way to improve.
Right.
We've done a video about why intensives are important. But honestly, if you don't have the financial means or the time to take off work to go do an intensive, find the best person in your local club.
Yeah.
And be a part of your local club. I think that's important too. But find the best person in your local club and just say, hey, do you need help volunteering? Because even if it's raking leaves in their garden, just being around good trees, you're going to learn something.
Yeah. I was thinking if I had sometimes raking the leaves at Michael Hagedorn's garden, I'm squatting there and I look up at a tree above me and I see the bottom of the pads for the first time and how they're arranged. And I go, that's how.
Yeah,
so there's these hidden little illuminations all over the place when you visit other people's gardens.
Being around these good trees, you will learn so much, even if you're doing kind of grunt work, even if you're just picking up leaves, even raking leaves, even if you're peeling moss off the trunk.
Applying fertilizer or whatever.
Yeah, just get out of the house and go have some hands-on tree time, and I guarantee you'll learn more than watching this video right now.
Right. Let's get to the idea of bonsai 24/7. Obsessing about it 24/7. We had this analogy of practicing chord shapes on the subway. Like I'm sitting on the subway and I'm like imagining piano chord shapes in my hands. You know, what is the equivalent of that in bonsai?
Yeah, bonsai is your bonsai brain almost never turns off, and that's what I see again at people who do this at the most excessive, highest level.
Yep.
Is your bonsai brain just doesn't turn off. It's you're constantly, if you're not physically working on trees, you're thinking about working on your trees. If you're not physically shopping for material, you're thinking about what material might be out there. If you're not physically working in your garden, you're thinking about how to make improvements to your garden. It's this constant kind of mind game of trying to improve, trying to get better, trying to, even if I'm not working on this vine maple right now, okay, what can I do to this vine maple next month, the month after that, to make it better? Bonsai is action, right? And even if you're not doing physical action, that mental action I think is important.
Have you ever found yourself imagining a wire plan in your head? Imagining like coiling wire in your head? Just practicing how you would put that on? Maybe this is probably years ago for you, but
I think years ago. But what I do think about is branch line and where to bend and place branches.
Yeah. Do you ever see cities in the tree and go, that's a good line?
I do. I think as a deciduous person, I'm much more interested in line than I am maybe pad design. And so I think studying fractal patterns, studying how line can organize. I mean, I get really inspired by seeing how coral grows, because it's creating lines that are inspired by photosynthesis that build beautiful
Seeking
architecture.
Light. Right. Yeah. Anything else to say about work?
I think the most important thing is whenever I'm working on a tree, and like I said, if you don't have enough time to work on all the trees you have too many trees. But whenever I'm working on a tree, I want to make it the best that I possibly can in that moment. And so taking an extra 10 or 20% of the time to move a branch, even if it's ever so slightly, just trying to make the best with what you can every single time is something that I think really yields a strong bonsai lifestyle. It's every single time something's in front of us, how can we maximize our time? Because it's going to then go back out in the garden with 200 other trees and just get lost in the abyss. So how do I maximize that time when that's in front of me to prioritize that tree and make it as special as I can?
Before we move on to the next point, I wanted to share that one thing that really helped me was to give myself the permission to straddle the work across more than one day. Because if I was convinced that I had to get it done by the end of the day, whether it was wiring or whatever it was, or even cleaning up the garden, I would rush it.
Yeah, I think giving yourself that space. I mean, I try not to post on social media as much as I can, because I'd rather be here in my garden working on bonsai. So I'm terrible at marketing. But whenever I do post a tree on social media, I post it when it's, quote, done, and then I live with it on social media for a few days as I'm seeing, comments or whatever come in.
Yeah, and then you look back and you see the flaws.
And then I go back and fix it.
Yeah.
And so people are seeing kind of my rough draft on social media. And then I'll see some line in the tree that needs a little tweak or something. I'll go make that tweak, and then I'll feel really good.
Yeah, nothing makes you fix things faster than when you know people are coming over to take a look.
Yeah.
Earlier you mentioned context. So we're doing all of this stuff somewhere. We're placing all of this stuff somewhere.
Yes.
What is the nature of that space, and why is it one of the three legs on this table of quality bonsai lifestyle?
So it was interesting. I was just in Japan with a group of people. We were driving around in a van. We saw over 20 different bonsai gardens. Really, the three criteria that everybody responded to are what we're talking about right now in this obsessive bonsai lifestyle. It's good trunks, good work, and this last one, a pretty space. And it was interesting because we went to a handful of gardens that had good trunks and good work, but the space was a disaster. Meaning maybe just the focus on cleanliness wasn't there, the visitor experience, maybe, at other gardens we had better hospitality, and these few we didn't. The density, you know, having too many trees that it was uncomfortable to walk around. You couldn't squat down and really look into a tree and appreciate it. The gardens that had really nice material and really good work on them, but had a really kind of not pretty space, were gardens that tour group, that 10 different people really didn't like.
Did you find any correlation between a sort of decaying or negligent space and the work? Was there any, because I know that Japan has excellent material, but do you think there's any connection between the work and the space?
Well, space...
Because some listener, even myself, when we were thinking about this episode, they might take issue with the fact that, like, well, I could be an amazing bonsai artist and I can put together amazing work and get really, really good material and nobody has to see it, but it could still be amazing, right?
Yeah.
And is that a valid point completely, or?
I think it is. Space is important because if you don't present your work in a space, and we're saying space, but let's define what space is. It could either be a garden, it could be a display table at the Pacific Bonsai Expo, it could be a photograph that you post on your Instagram feed.
Do you think it extends to your workshop?
I think it extends to your workshop. I think it extends to your side growing area. I think it extends kind of everywhere.
Right.
Having a focus on really good clean space was something that we saw at all the top gardens. All of my favorite gardens in Japan and in the United States, they have good trees, good work, and a pretty space to present it all. And it doesn't seem like it's that important to have a good space, but it's I think the best, and I think the best analogy is a restaurant. Like, you could have really tasty, delicious food. You could have food that looks incredibly beautiful, but if the server is rude, if the table's dirty, you're probably not going back.
Probably not, yeah.
And so that psychology, I think...
You also have suspicions, right, about this.
You have suspicions, yeah. And so that psychology, I think, is really, really important. That's why, you know, and you don't have to be a professional to do this. I think Sergio Kwan is a bonsai professional that gets great or a bonsai hobbyist that gets great material, does nice work on them, and presents it in a really beautiful way, both online and in his actual garden space. And I think all of the top hobbyists in the U.S. and the top bonsai professionals, you know, they follow these three things. They have a really pretty space, that they're doing good work on good trees.
Yeah, it's interesting to me because it almost seems like it's the tail wagging the dog, in that, like, it's interesting that the customer's experience at the restaurant implies that the chef is good, but, like, we're also saying to the listeners of this episode that the chef becomes better because of the space being better. And no question, like, working in a nice, clean kitchen is awesome, right? It makes you feel more productive.
You feel better. It probably gives you that mental clarity to do work that's 10% better than you were doing before.
Right. But then you are also your own spectator after you've worked on a tree and set it back out into your grow space, right?
Yes.
So you're going to be coming back. It's like the chef goes and admires his own meal afterwards, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't work too well as an analogy in cooking, but in bonsai it definitely does.
I think
maybe it does work in cooking.
I think it does work in cooking. But in bonsai, like, let's say I work on a tree, we bring something in, we work on it, we put it out in the garden. I mean, if it's going back into a really cluttered garden, are you really going to see an improvement a week later that you can make on that tree? Versus if it's going in a very pretty display space and you're walking through, you're enjoying your garden, you're kind of taking it in and analyzing.
You're reinforcing your bond with the tree that you just worked with too, argue, right?
And then you see something in the tree, oh, well, maybe I should tweak it a little that way or a little that way. Yeah. That's going to make the tree better. And I guarantee you, someone who comes and visits and experiences your garden is going to be able to appreciate it if they have the space to see that tree.
Right. Yeah, you should want to be there. I've noticed a workshop effect of wanting to be there. Like, the more cleaned up, the more creature comforts, the more ready at hand everything is in my workshop, the more I have wire all neatly organized. we're talking about display spaces, but I
Yeah.
also feel like, just everything is connected to this idea of cleanliness, tidiness, display.
It's as
perfection.
obsessive you are as wiring and bending that branch, as obsessive you are as choosing the branches on a particular tree,
Right.
to do all that work on. I think that all goes into the garden space as well. You need to be as obsessive, or another way to say it is the people that I respect the most in bonsai are as obsessive about the space in which their trees exist as
Right.
they are the work that they're doing on the trees and the trees that they're choosing to do the work on.
Right. We're making these observations about these people who
Yeah.
are so superlative in their art.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, this isn't just for people who want to have kind of high-level show gardens. We visited, when I was in Japan, probably the best shohin grower. His name's Iwazaki. He's grown the best shohin pines in all of Japan, and he happened to grow a lot of other great shohin species, a lot of deciduous species as well. He had a cleaner growing operation than most bonsai professionals in the United States have a garden. It was so organized and clean and focused that it, I think, yielded in some subconscious way better work being done on the trees that he was developing.
Yeah, he couldn't avoid
He couldn't avoid it.
being
And
part of the space.
yeah, and if I was there as a customer, I can't buy those trees and import them, but if I was there as a customer, it made me want to buy every single tree on the property. Versus if I went to a bonsai nursery that there's just crap all over the place, I'm not really inspired to get out my checkbook and spend.
This actually, it reminds me of this idea of kind of like making a tree that lives up to the beautiful pot,
Yeah.
that you buy. So, yeah, and I think another point that maybe we should repeat is just it's a good place to review your work in the cycle, because we're talking about a lifestyle. We're talking about like how you spend a time during a year. You keep going back.
Yeah.
It's a place you're in really, really frequently, right?
It is. I mean, one of my favorite American philosophers, Charles Dewey. Am I saying? Is it? I know it's Dewey. He wrote a book called Art is Experience that I loved in college, or read in college, and it left a really strong impression on me. He basically said, if art isn't in the public, it's not art.
Right.
If you're the best painter in the world, but you're just in an attic doing it by yourself and nobody ever sees the painting, you haven't created art, because no one has kind of lived to see it. Art is experience. Art needs to be where people can come and see it and appreciate it and take it in. And that's why having a nice garden, even if you're just doing this as a hobbyist at home, just
Starts there, I guess you're saying.
yeah, I mean, having some people from your local club come over, I mean, what lasting impression can you leave on them? Is even if you have a really small space, if you do it really nicely and your tree work gets to really shine, like what a great impression that could leave on people.
Yeah, yeah. We're getting close to the end of this, and I see a lot of themes of sort of passion and intensity, like somebody that wants to do this. And so the Quality Bonsai obsessive lifestyle
Yeah,
is not fully robot, right?
yeah.
There's some emotional component to it, right?
Yeah, like two things. Number one, love is sacrifice. And so the top level bonsai people, everybody that I look up to, they've made significant sacrifices in their life to have this.
Right.
Bonsai is not easy.
Fewer vacations, for sure.
Fewer vacations. I can only vacation in the winter because I can't get away in the summer. I can't risk my trees being here on a heat wave when I'm not here.
Yeah, they wouldn't be able to be on autopilot at that time.
Yeah. And so that takes a toll on people, especially if you have a family and other people in your life that create those different variables.
So the motivation to do bonsai has to be super innate.
Has to be super innate.
Yeah.
And it has to be very intentional too. So, I mean, a bonsai lifestyle, an obsessive bonsai lifestyle is not without sacrifice. I mean, you're basically sacrificing a lot of your personal time, freedom, mobility
Yeah.
for a garden.
Dropping
of
an anchor
trees.
to do something amazing, and it better be beautiful.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you're going to do it, you might as well obsess and geek out about all these 3 points. But the other thing is, sacrifice is about love and passion. And, the people that I respect the most, that I think are doing bonsai at the highest level, the most cutting edge, are people not just who have good trees, good work, and a pretty space to present them, but they have an immense passion for bonsai. They love bonsai. Even bonsai that might not be as they would rather be working on lower. We spend a lot of time talking about material selection. They would rather be working on lower quality material than no material at all,
Right.
because they just love bonsai so much.
Yeah, I've often thought about what if the fire took my house, right? And I would just pick up the next day and just keep going.
Yeah,
Whatever I could get my hands
if
on.
someone, yeah, if a fire came through, destroyed all of these trees, I would rebuild. Because I can't do anything else. Like, it is just, it's what I live and breathe and sleep. It's the passion.
Nicely said.
And I think people need that. And it's tough because we can really criticize material, we can really criticize the work, and we can really criticize people's gardens. And we can, I think you have to be able to do that to be practicing at the highest level. But at the end of the day, you need to be able to shut all that down, power that off, and just love bonsai for the sake of loving bonsai.
Yeah,
and
there still needs to be whimsy in it too.
Yeah, and I think that's where a lot of people at the top of the game is, yes, they care deeply about those 3 points, but then they can hit the shutdown button on all of that criticism of those things, and they can just enjoy bonsai at the end of the day.
Right. Nice.
So, well, that's a little bit about what it means to be obsessed about this quality bonsai lifestyle. I'm Andrew Robson.
I'm Maciek.
And we will see you on the next episode.